This is an RC where the RC itself is, I would say, somewhere around medium difficulty. Depending on how comfortable you are with the genre, you might find this either, relatively simple to understand or maybe a little hard. But the great thing about this RC is if you are understanding the passage, then all of the questions are straightforward and, the right answer will sort of just jump out at you, right? Now, there's this one question which we could solve as soon as we read about it. Pinker and Chomsky may disagree with each other on which one of the following points. So this is something that we're going to be looking out for. And this is an exception to my usual rule where I say that don't focus too much on names. But these two names we'll of course have to look out for. The rest of the questions are either direct, multiple or inferential type. So we'll be solving them after we are done with the passage. Starting in 1957, Noam Chomsky proclaimed a new doctrine, language, that most human of all attributes was innate. So Chomsky is saying that language is innate or inherent or inbuilt in us. The other thing which we know about language is that it is the most human of all attributes. That makes sense because while we know that, a lot of other animals and birds, they do communicate, I don't think any species has been found to have as many words as we do, as many nuances, or, is able to communicate as much as we do, right? So he's saying that this is something which is innate or inherent. The grammatical faculty was built into the infant brain, and your average 3-year-old was not a mere apprentice in the great enterprise of absorbing English from his or her parents, but a linguistic genius. Should you not know the meaning of this word, the next sentence makes it clear. This is something which is inbuilt, right? So what do we mean by language? Probably the ability to structure sentences, the ability to sort of structure sentences grammatically is something which is inbuilt into us. So we are not learning it from our parents or people around us when we are kids. We actually have that capability in our brains, and we are, it's more like we are developing it. Since this message was couched in terms of Chomskyan theoretical linguistics in discourse so opaque that was nearly incomprehensible even to some scholars, many people did not hear it. So this is something which he wrote in his typical style, which seems to be very opaque, right? So opaque, it's the opposite of transparent, or you can also treat it as the opposite of clear. Even if you're not sure of this word, it was nearly incomprehensible even to some scholars. So even some scholars did not understand. Goes without saying that, the general public would not understand. So a lot of people did not hear his doctrine. Now, in a brilliant, witty, and altogether satisfying book, Mr. Chomsky's colleague Steven Pinker has brought Mr. Chomsky's findings to every man. In The Language Instinct, he has gathered persuasive data from such diverse fields as cognitive neuroscience, developmental psychology, and speech therapy to make his points. And when he disagrees with Mr. Chomsky, he tells you so. So, what has Steven Pinker done? He has come out with a much simpler explanation of the same thing in his book. His book must be called The Language Instinct. And here he has not just sort of shared Chomsky's doctrine or Chomsky's theories with us. If he's disagreeing with Mr. Chomsky, he's telling us that. And he's also brought in data from a lot of different areas. So it's not just what Noam Chomsky has said. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's also, he's also brought in stuff from the field of neuroscience, developmental psychology, and so on to sort of have a complete write-up. Now, so far we've been told that when he disagrees with Mr. Chomsky, he tells you so. So we'll keep reading to find the answer for this question. For Mr. Chomsky and Mr. Pinker, somewhere in the human brain, there is a complex set of neural circuits that have been programmed with super rules, making up what Mr. Chomsky calls universal grammar, and that these rules are unconscious and instinctive. So both Chomsky and Pinker believe that there is this part in our brain where there are a lot of nerve cells together forming a circuit of sorts. And this is where this universal grammar or this language ability is something which is there. And this is also something which is unconscious and instinctive. It's not something that you and I have consciously come up with. It's something which is inherently there in our brain. A half-century ago, this would have been poo-pooed as a black box theory, since one could not actually pinpoint this grammatical faculty in a specific part of the brain or describe its functioning. But now things are different. Neurosurgeons have now found that this black box is situated in and around Broca's area on the left side of the forebrain. So this must be a part of the brain. So now this also shows us that what Chomsky and Pinker are saying is actually correct. So what are they saying? So imagine I'm just randomly drawing nerves and something like a neural circuit. I'll put in a better picture for you as well. Right. So somewhere in the brain, there is this, there are all of these nerves sort of connected together, which are giving us this ability of universal grammar or ability of language. Now, what is universal grammar? In English, for instance, we will typically start a sentence with a noun or a pronoun, and then we'll have a verb, maybe then another verb, or an adjective or something like I am studying, or I am tired, something like that, right? So that ability is something which is inherent in our brain. So language or grammatical ability, let's put it as, this is something which we have in our brain, and this is something which only humans have, and this is something which is unconscious and inherent. So I'll just put unconscious in short. So this is something which both Chomsky and Pinker believe, and this is something which seems to have been proven true as well. This next paragraph is probably going to help us to answer this question. Why? Unlike Mr. Chomsky, Mr. Pinker firmly places the wiring of the brain for language within the framework of Darwinian natural selection and evolution. So what is natural selection? So Darwin's theory essentially is that, if any particular member of a species develops this ability which is helpful for its survival. Say, there's one deer that suddenly becomes faster because of some mutation in its gene. So what is going to happen? The faster deer is obviously going to be better at escaping from predators, so it's more likely to live on, and then it's more likely to pass on that gene or those genes to its children, right? So then in the next generation, from one deer, maybe there are 2 or 3 deer which have that ability, and so on, and over generations and generations, this positive ability is something which spreads. So any mutation which is helpful in the survival of a particular species will tend to spread. So that, in short, is natural selection. Now I am explaining it in a very, very simplistic manner. Please definitely check it out if you want to understand evolution and natural selection properly. We have had a lot of RCs which have come up in this area. This is, of course, something which is, I think, of interest to all of us, because this is how we have evolved, right? But this is the difference between the opinions of Mr. Chomsky and Mr. Pinker, that Pinker feels that this ability is something which actually is because of natural selection. So it has been, I can't say natural selection has brought it about. I can say that, this is something which gives us an evolutionary advantage. Let's just finish this paragraph, get a better understanding of this, and then we'll try out this question. He effectively disposes of all claims that intelligent non-human primates like chimps have any abilities to learn and use language. It's not that chimps lack the vocal apparatus to speak, it's just that their brains are unable to produce or use grammar. On the other hand, the language instinct, when it first appeared among our most distant hominid ancestors, hominids probably some human derivative, must have given them a selective reproductive advantage over their competitors, including the ancestral chimps. So what is Pinker saying? Pinker is saying that this is something which we have evolved with natural selection. It's something which has given us an evolutionary or a reproductive advantage. And if anyone's making any claims that, hey, other primates that are intelligent also have the ability to speak, right? He's saying that that physical ability is there, that vocal apparatus, right, to speak, whatever, mouth, throat, the larynx, things like that might be there. But in the brain, they don't have this language ability which we have. So he is sort of disproving anybody claiming that other primates or other intelligent animals also have this ability. He's also saying that given that we have this ability, it obviously gives us an advantage. So just think about it, right? Think of our maybe million years back or something like that, or maybe even earlier, our ancestors, right? So if suddenly they are able to speak, they're able to communicate more than other animals, it definitely is a distinct advantage. If there's a group of humans, they can escape from predators faster, they can work together to maybe build shelter, find food. There's so much that they can do, so it definitely gives an advantage. Now this is going in a slightly different direction, so now let's try out this question. Pinker and Chomsky may disagree with each other on which one of the following points. We know that this is the part that he feels that it's because of natural selection, right? So looking for that in the options, the possibility of a universal grammar, no, this both of them believe. Same for this, the language instinct. It's probably another way, it's given in quotes, so maybe this is exactly what Chomsky called it. But this again says that this is an inherent ability that we have, right? Now both of them feel it's unconscious, so it has to be an instinct. The inborn language acquisition skills of humans is again something that they both believe, and that brings us to option 4, the Darwinian explanatory paradigm for language. This is probably a slightly complicated way of saying that language is something which evolved to give us an evolutionary or a natural selection related advantage. So we will go with this. Should you not understand this exactly, right? So it doesn't really matter, because we can see for sure that these are 3 things which both of them agree on, they don't disagree. And we know that, this Darwinian natural selection evolutionary framework is something which is given. So we can be reasonably certain that this is the answer and go for it. So this is something which Pinker felt, so I'll just put that. So according to Mr. Pinker, the roots of language must be in the genes, but there cannot be a grammar gene any more than there can be a gene for the heart or any other complex body structure. So what is Pinker saying? He's saying that this is a genetic thing, right? So this language ability, this thing which is there in our brain, this is something which is genetic, but that doesn't mean that there is this one gene which gives us the ability to understand grammar or structure sentences or speak, right? So this language ability is not something which one gene comes up with, which is the same for there isn't that one gene which leads me to having a heart or lungs or something like that, right? So anything complex in humans, even things like emotions and all, there'll be multiple genes which would come together and be involved. It's enough that it is a genetic ability. That's it. It's not one gene. This proposition will undoubtedly raise the hackles of some behavioral psychologists and anthropologists, for it apparently contradicts the liberal idea that human behavior may be changed for the better by improvements in culture and environment. And it might seem to invite the twin bugaboos of biological determinism and racism. Very long sentence, let's break it down. Now, given that Pinker is now saying, and which is the same as what Chomsky is saying, that this is an inherent ability in our brain. The ability to speak is something which is inherently there in our brain, and it's something which is genetically derived. Now, what can that do? If there are any anthropologists or any behavioral psychologists who feel that culture plays a very big role, right, or environment plays a very big role, say, my ability to speak well, or my ability to understand English well, or, read fast or something like that, if they feel that, it's dependent on the environment that I'm raised in and a culture that maybe, prizes the ability to speak well, that is something which he has now disproved. At the same time, when we start saying that this is something which is physically inherent in our brain or genetically there, this also can bring about things like, biological determinism. What is determinism? Something which is not in your hands, something which is predestined or predetermined for us. So I am not sort of like, the master of my fate or my destiny, because this is something which is destined for me. So if I have this ability, if I have, if that neural circuit is like, really big in my brain, then I have this ability. If that is not the case, then I don't have this ability. And it could also be that, there are people of one ethnicity or one race where they have this ability better, right? So all of these things can come up. And again, things like, racism and, supremacy of a particular set, like say white supremacists, which is like, the Caucasian people are superior, better than Asians, Africans, and so on. These sort of things can come up again, right? So these are the two issues which could be there, right? We are giving a lot of importance to biology, not as much to culture and environment, and that can also lead to racism and other similar associated arguments or allegations. Yet, now this is of course important, this helps us understand that this even the sentence, we can see that this is probably not the author's view, but the next, this contrasting word yet, which is similar to but, makes it easier for us to focus on the next part. Mr. Pinker stresses one point that should allay such fears. So any such fears, Pinker is himself sort of calming these fears or removing them. Even though there are 4,000 to 6,000 languages today, they are all sufficiently alike to be considered one language by an extraterrestrial observer. In other words, most of the diversity of the world's cultures, so beloved to anthropologists, is superficial and minor compared to the similarities. Racial differences are literally only skin deep. So what is Pinker saying? Pinker is sort of himself, alleviating or removing these fears by saying that it's not the case that one culture has this ability more or less. In fact, he's saying that the thousands of languages that we have today, right? So all these languages, he's saying they are so similar that if there's this extraterrestrial, there's this alien that comes and, the alien hears all of our languages, it'll actually think that these languages are all similar, right? So that is what he's saying. He's saying all of these different cultures and all the differences are very, very minor. The similarities are a lot. Right? And he is saying that racial differences are literally only skin deep. So that of course makes sense. You have somebody that's, say, African, they're going to be a little bit darker, or they're going to be darker than somebody that's Caucasian. So that's it. It's just the skin which is different, right? The culture, the language, the ability, all of these are there in all of us humans, no matter what language we speak. So he is actually saying that all humans are alike and all humans have this ability. So it's definitely a very positive ideology. And that's how the author concludes as well. The fundamental unity of humanity is the theme of Mr. Chomsky's universal grammar and of this exciting book. So this is something which the author is definitely for, and the author is very positive about. And even Chomsky and Pinker are pretty positive about this, right? So both of them are saying that all of these languages are similar. How can I say both of them? Now we know Pinker is saying this, and then here the author ends by saying that Chomsky's universal grammar and this exciting book, which has to be Pinker's book, both of them speak about the fundamental unity of humanity. So both of them feel that this is an ability which is inherent in our brain, and this is an ability that all humans have, no matter what language we speak. And if you understand this bit, then you'll see that solving the remaining three questions is very straightforward. Starting with the first one, which one of the following statements best summarizes the author's position about Pinker's book? So we know what Pinker's book is about, right? It's telling us that, this language ability is something which is inherent in the brain. The author's position or the author's view about it, and that's something which I would definitely recommend that you articulate first. Any such question like this, right? Just articulate the author's view and then look for an option which is close to that or which is in line with that, and you'll find that then you can straight go to the right option and you are typically not stuck between a couple of options, which happens many a time. So what is the author's view here? The author is saying that this book is brilliant, it's witty. Pinker simply explained Chomsky's doctrine, and he's also brought about a lot. I think there was he's brought about neurology and psychology and all of those, and the author's definitely positive about this book, and the author's also saying that it's something which sort of unites all humans. So if we have any option which is tonally negative, right, which is being pessimistic, we'll definitely eliminate that. That will be the easiest to eliminate. Now, looking at the options, the universality of the language instinct counters claims that Pinker's book is racist. This part is true, because this is something which is universal. It counters or disproves any claims that he's written a racist book. So this can be the right answer. Let's just read the others and see if there's something better. Culture and environment play a key role in shaping our acquisition of language. This is false. We know that according to Pinker, they don't play a key role. In fact, we've been told that psychologists and anthropologists, they might get angry because this is their idea, which Pinker's book actually contradicts. So this is eliminated. Anatomical developments like the voice box play a key role in determining language acquisition skills. Again, this is wrong, because in the case of chimps, we've been told that they have the vocal apparatus, right? They have these, these parts or this anatomy, but their brains are not able to produce or use grammar. So it is, the brain, the neural circuits, which are most important. So again, we can eliminate this option. The evolutionary and deterministic framework of Pinker's book makes it racist. That is not the case. It is not racist. Yes, it is evolutionary, but while it is deterministic, it's sort of uniting all humans, right? So this part is wrong. So we'll eliminate it. In fact, even though I was just explaining that while it is deterministic, that is something which it seems to invite, right? So it may seem deterministic because we have this ability in our brain. So just clarifying that the book may not be deterministic, but we are eliminating this option easily because the author is positive about Pinker's book. So we go for the first option here. From the passage, it can be inferred that all of the following are true about Pinker's book, The Language Instinct, except that Pinker. So 3 out of these 4 options are going to be true about Pinker's book. Whatever is not becomes the right answer. Pinker writes in a different style from Chomsky. This is true. We know that, the way Chomsky had written was very difficult and opaque, and even some scholars didn't understand it. But Pinker's writing is like simple and witty, and it's something which, even like common people or general people who are not experts in this can understand. So this is true, so we'll eliminate it. Disagrees with Chomsky on certain grounds. This is also true. When he disagrees, he tells you so. That implies that he does disagree. We, of course, have already answered a question about what is the difference, so you already know that. Draws from behavioral psychology theories. This is wrong. While we know that he has gathered data from developmental psychology, behavioral psychology is something which is mentioned over here. And here we've been told that, at least some of them feel that culture and environment plays a role, whereas Chomsky says that this ability to speak is something which is inherent in our brain. So this should be the right answer. Draws extensively from Chomsky's propositions. This is also true. This is something, again, which was given in the beginning itself, because he is actually simplifying Chomsky's doctrine. While he has brought in, more new information and persuasive data and all of that, he is specifically, of course, expanding Chomsky's doctrine. So this, again, we can eliminate. And if you see, all of the wrong answers are actually there in the first paragraph itself. So should something like this happen where, you are in a rush, like by a rush, I mean, let's say, there's only 5 minutes left and you can't finish an entire RC, there could be a question like this. Sometimes, of course, we have very straightforward questions which speak about first paragraph or second paragraph or something like that. But even questions like this, right, you can see that we could just read these. We would not have found the third option. It's a risky strategy that I'm telling you. But when you have very little time left and you can't solve too many questions, something like this you can still try. According to the passage, all of the following are true about the language instinct except that. Now here this L and I are in small, so we are not referring to Pinker's book, The Language Instinct, but we are referring to this concept in general, which is that language or, grammar, this ability is something which is inherent in the human brain. Now there's a lot more that we know about it. We'll keep these attributes in mind. When in doubt, we will, check each option with the passage. 3 out of these 4 options are going to be correct. We'll eliminate them. Whatever is either not given or whatever is wrong, that becomes the right answer. Now here, of course, the first option, straight up, we can see that it's wrong. All intelligent primates are gifted with it is wrong, because we know that we've been told that chimps, while they have the vocal apparatus, they have the ability to speak, but they don't have the mental capacity to speak. So they are not actually gifted with this language instinct. Now here you have to infer that the language instinct is nothing but this ability in our brain. Should you be a little doubtful, the second option I think will make it easier for you to go for the first option, because not all intelligent primates are gifted with it. One of the two has to be the right answer. Very rarely have I seen a case when you will have two options like this and one of them will not be the right answer. I think the option, the example which comes to mind is there's an aggression RC which I think is there in 2020. We'll be solving that anyway soon for you. So that is something where you can look out for, where you have two opposite options, but both of them are not the right answer. But typically when you have something like this, so you have two options which are similar, definitely pay more attention to them. And here, of course, logically we know that this is the case, and that helps us eliminate the second option. Quickly looking at the other two, developments in neuroscience have increased its acceptance. That is definitely true, because now that neurosurgeons have found it, this cannot be poo-pooed, or this cannot be just critiqued as a black box theory, right? So we will eliminate this. It confers an evolutionary reproductive advantage. This is also true. This is something which Pinker believes. So it could be a little bit tricky for us to sort of accept this option. But taking what Pinker is saying to be true, he is saying that this is something which gives us a reproductive or an evolutionary advantage. So we can eliminate this option as well and go for the first. And that's it for this RC. And tomorrow I'll be solving CAT 2020 RC. So stay tuned for that as well.